Olivia struggled to hold back her tears once again. She had believed, for the umpteenth time, that everything would be okay, but Felicity and her daughter Nancy would once again expose Olivia as a spoiled girl with a difficult adolescence in front of her father. I knew that puberty is a difficult period. Felicity rolled her eyes in front of her upset spouse. But this is something else. Olivia is spiraling out of control. If only you knew how hard I have to bring her up. It wasn't like this with my Nancy. I know you do a lot for Olivia, and I appreciate you for that. Jim spoke with his eyes lowered to the floor. He was ashamed of his daughter's bad behaviour. Olivia had repeatedly tried to convey to him that when he is not at home, stepmother Felicity humiliates her, loads her with endless chores, does not let her study, meet her friends, do her favourite things. But Felicity was a master at manipulating people and a skilled actress. She always managed to turn the father against his daughter. She would use words that made all of Olivia's explanations and arguments seem like pathetic excuses and attempts to defame a saintly woman who was dealing with someone else's difficult child. So now Olivia wouldn't even bother herself trying to prove to her father that she was innocent. It wouldn't lead to anything. The girl sat on her bed, huddled in the corner, and buried her face into a huge teddy bear. It was a gift from her grandmother's neighbour, Mr. Shanks, when Olivia was 7 years old. She was overjoyed when she saw him with the big toy in his hands. He always came to their house with a big smile on his face. Oh, those were the most wonderful times. If only she could go back to then. Thinking of her grandmother, Olivia smiled. Yes, she longed for her beloved grandmother, who loved and accepted her unconditionally. Sarah showered her only granddaughter with warmth and care, talked to her a lot and hugged her often. But it had been almost 5 years since she passed. Olivia was 10 then, and since that time, Olivia's life had changed, and not for the better. But Olivia's childhood had been simply wonderful. Despite not knowing her own mother, she felt truly happy under her grandmother's protection. Olivia's mother had died shortly after giving birth to her. There were unforeseen complications after childbirth, and the doctors couldn't do anything. So Jim was left alone with an infant in his arms. He had loved his wife deeply and had a hard time coping with her loss. He had no idea what to do with a newborn child. Fortunately, his mother was there at that difficult moment. Sarah took the girl and relieved her inconsolable son, who was almost dead with grief. Initially, Sarah lived in her son's apartment in the city. Jim worked as a ship mechanic on a fishing vessel and often went on long voyages. He didn't have a strong desire to take care of the baby, and Olivia ended up under the full care of her grandmother. At first, Sarah tried to encourage a bond between her son and his daughter. She wanted Jim to take care of the child himself. It wasn't that she found it difficult, no, but it was the right thing to do. But Jim refused. He was grieving and blamed his daughter for what had happened to his beloved wife. Olivia realized this later as she grew older. For a long time, Jim believed that it would have been better if he and his wife had not had children at all. They could have travelled, focused all their attention on each other and been happy. Jim was deeply in love with his young, beautiful wife and mourned her loss for a long time. Eventually, Sarah grew tired of being the mediator between Jim and Olivia. She was going to return to her small hometown, to her cosy house with the green roof. There was so much for her to do there, tending to the vegetable garden, raising chickens, taking care of cats and a dog. During her prolonged absence, the neighbour Mr. Shanks had taken care of everything. They had a good and warm relationship, and Sarah also had helped him out more than once. Seeing that her adult son couldn't be reached, the woman packed up little Olivia and returned home. Jim was only happy about this decision. The infant irritated him, and by her mere appearance reminded him of tragedy. Besides, the man soon had to go on a long voyage, which also pleased him. The waves, socializing with colleagues, hard physical labour. Jim hoped that all this would help him get his mind off his troubled thoughts. Partly, by the way, it turned out so. As for Sarah, she began to take care of her little granddaughter with her usual vigour. Diapers, feeding, walks with the stroller. It was as if she became a young mother again. Only now she was already enjoying motherhood with full commitment. When her own son Jim was a baby, the woman didn't feel the full happiness of having a child. She had to deal with a bunch of things at once, to set up life in a small village house, to finish studying at the local college, and also to work part-time. Now the woman gave all her time, all her attention, all the warmth to Olivia. Looking at the girl, she felt a mixture of pinching tenderness and acute pity. How can it be? Such a tiny baby, already left without a mother, and her father doesn't seem to want her. Jim's behaviour was very upsetting to Sarah, but she hoped that could be fixed with time. Olivia grew up, a sweet and problem-free child. She had few illnesses, and she started sitting, walking and talking on time. Sarah could not be more glad about her. The girl grew up surrounded by friendly people who gave her warmth and acceptance. The grandmother was the most important person to Olivia. She was always a reliable, caring, kind person who would understand and support no matter what. Sarah opened the whole world to her granddaughter, explained complicated things to the little girl. Olivia couldn't remember a single time when her grandmother dismissed her questions, as adults usually do. It was as if they understood each other without words. Sarah had friends and neighbours, and they were also involved in Olivia's upbringing. The girl often went to visit them, made friends with their grandchildren. There were times that a bunch of children would run from house to house. Somewhere they'd have breakfast together, somewhere they'd have lunch, somewhere they'd watch TV together. Someone's father would take the group to the river or the woods. It was fun. The girl had a particularly warm relationship with Mr. Shanks. His house stood opposite her grandmother's, and the elderly man often came to them to help her with men's chores, fix the faucet, fix the roof on the shed, move a cupboard. And Sarah would feed him delicious pies and flavoured meatballs. Mr. Shanks was a widower, and Olivia, hearing this strange word for the first time, frowned thoughtfully, trying to understand what it meant. The grandmother explained, of course, why no one bakes him pies now. Of course, the man was perfectly capable of cooking, but he never learned the art of baking. Olivia later realised that Mr. Shanks had more than just friendly feelings for her grandmother. Why not? He was a widower, and Olivia's granddad had passed away a long time ago. But Grandma, she must have decided to dedicate her entire life to her granddaughter, without any other distractions. The woman had big plans for Olivia's future. She spent a lot of time with the girl, putting her heart and soul into her. She thought that she would be with her granddaughter for a long time, teaching her, getting her married, and even helping her with great-grandchildren. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Thanks to her grandmother, Olivia had warm memories of her childhood. She particularly loved the summers, when they were a cheerful and carefree pair. During their summer vacations, Mr. Shanks' granddaughters Molly and Kathy would come to him from the city. They were Olivia's best friends, and she eagerly looked forward to their visits all year long. The three girls would spend the entire day together, never getting bored. They would ride bicycles, explore the river and the woods, play hide and seek, and share scary stories in the evenings. Often a group of children would spend the night at Olivia's house. Sarah never turned down her granddaughter's requests to let someone stay overnight, and the children would stay up all night, chatting and giggling, and the woman never scolded them, knowing how much fun they were having. Of course, Olivia realised early that she lived a different life compared to the other children. Not all of them had fathers, but they all had mothers. The mothers varied in age, beauty, strictness and kindness, but they were always there for their children, as were their fathers. Of course, Olivia started asking her grandmother questions early on, so the woman had to tell Olivia the story of her birth. The girl did not know her mother. so she wasn't too upset, especially when her grandmother said that her mum was now in heaven and helping her from there. It was like a beautiful fairy tale. But from time to time, a longing squeezed Olivia's heart. She sometimes imagined what it would be like to experience certain moments in life if her mum was still alive. However, these thoughts didn't bother Olivia much. While she lived with her grandmother, her life was warm and good. As for her father, of course, he would visit them at least once every 2 months, and always made sure to come on Olivia's birthday with gifts if he wasn't on a trip. For Olivia, he was familiar and family, but also almost a stranger. He was a handsome young man, with sad grey eyes, always well-groomed and stylishly dressed. He would bring gifts like beautiful dolls, elegant dresses and interesting books. Olivia always wondered, how does her father always manage to guess exactly what she dreams of? Only later she realised that her grandmother used to tell her son what exactly to buy for Olivia in the city. Jim would usually stay for a couple of days, sometimes a week. He didn't know what to talk about with his daughter, so he would ask obligatory questions about school, friends and hobbies. But Olivia could see that he wasn't particularly interested in all of this. It was different with Mr. Shanks. He loved listening to Olivia's stories about the adventures of the village children. He would laugh, recall episodes from his own childhood, and subtly give important advice. It was the opposite of what her father did. He would only ask because he had to. Olivia understood this, even as a very young girl. She really wanted to please her father, to at least interest him in something. But it was in vain. All of Olivia's attempts were met with indifference from her father. He would diligently fulfill his duties as a father and son, send money to his mother, buy necessary things for Olivia and repair the house when he visited. But he did it all out of a sense of duty. He and his daughter never developed any affection for each other. Sarah tried to explain to her son how to behave with Olivia. The adults thought Olivia was asleep, but she heard everything. "Girls need father's attention," Sarah half whispered to her son. "She's growing up. Come more often. Take her and go on vacation together. Show her cities. Take a vacation by the sea." "You know, Mum, I work a lot. I'm always in the sea making money. By the way, it's for Olivia's future." "But you often forget about the present," Sarah sighed sadly. "I don't forget. No, I see how well you're doing. Olivia is happy with you, while well, what can I give her? I'm still confused myself." Olivia, even though she was still very young, realised that her very existence was burdening her father. No, he wouldn't take her on vacation or visit her more often. Her father, he was better off on his own, without her and without his mother, in his own lonely and incomprehensible life. It hurt. Olivia loved her only parents very much. To realise that she wasn't needed by him was scary and unpleasant. The girl even shed a few tears into her pillow, but she acted as if nothing had happened the next morning. And then her father left, hugging Olivia as he always did when saying goodbye. "I'm going on a long trip," he said. "I won't see you for a long time. I won't be able to come to your first day at school. I'm sorry." "That's all right." Olivia waved her hand nonchalantly. She was used to her father being absent during the most important moments of her life. Luckily, her grandmother was always there for her. It was the summer before Olivia's first grade. She remembered it well because in August she had her birthday and an important event took place. As always, her grandmother set up 2 tables in the garden, one for the children and the other for their parents and grandparents. She always made Olivia's birthdays crowded, cheerful and bright. Both Olivia and her grandmother looked forward to this celebration all year long. Mr. Shanks arrived a little later than the other guests and gave Olivia a huge teddy bear, which his granddaughters helped him choose. "Happy birthday!" Molly and Kathy rushed to hug the birthday girl. "Thank you!" Olivia clapped her hands. "And what does Mr. Shanks have in his hands?" "Oh, this is my old guitar I recently found in the attic. I was sorting through things, thinking of throwing away unnecessary junk, and I came across this instrument." "Tom, I forgot you were a musician," rejoiced Sarah. "How long have you not been playing? Probably since your wife died, right?" "It's been about 15 years, nodded the neighbour. His eyes flashed with sadness for a moment. "I forgot about the guitar, and now suddenly I found it and remembered." "Play us something?" asked one of the adult guests. "Play, play!" the kids chimed in. Molly and Kathy beamed with pride next to their grandfather. Mr. Shanks had suddenly become the star of the party. Everyone was watching him. Everyone was begging. "Well, what do you want to hear?" asked the man. Everyone murmured approvingly. Then Mr. Shanks grabbed the guitar, struck the strings with his fingers, and some magic began. Melodic sounds filled the garden. Olivia looked at the elderly man in amazement. How does he do it? How is this beautiful melody born? The guests became enthusiastic. They ordered more and more songs from Mr. Shanks, and strangely enough, he knew them all. And if he didn't know them, he quickly picked up the necessary melodies. The adults sang in unison. It was wonderful, funny, and beautiful. The children came out from behind the table and started a game of hide-and-seek. They called Olivia to join them, but she couldn't tear herself away. She sat next to Mr. Shanks, listening to everything, and then somehow began to sing along with the adults without even noticing it. She quickly learned the words of the song about the wounded fighter. The guests sang it probably for the third time. The first person to notice was Mrs. Millis. "Listen," she suddenly said. "Do you hear her singing?" The guests fell silent, as did Olivia. She was shy to sing alone. Mrs. Millis realized this and sang the song with her. It was easier for Olivia. When the chords fell silent, there was applause. "Well done," praised the adults. "You sing well." "Not just well," Mrs. Millis shook her head. "The girl has talent. I'm telling you this as an employee culture centre. Sarah, why did you hide such a treasure from us all these years?" "I didn't even know it myself," smiled the proud grandmother. Since then, Mr. Shanks became an even more frequent guest in the house of the grandmother and granddaughter, and Olivia herself constantly ran to him. The man taught the girl many cheerful children's songs. Now she constantly hummed them everywhere, at home, in the vegetable garden, even on the way to the store. Why hadn't she realized before how great it was to sing? She didn't go to kindergarten because it was too far to drive her there. Her grandmother didn't work, so her granddaughter grew up with her. In kindergarten, the music teacher would have noticed Olivia's talent earlier, but at home... They hardly had any music at home. Grandmother usually played audiobooks, not songs. That's why Olivia only realized at the age of 6 how much she loved singing and music. "When school starts, we'll send you to the culture centre, to Mrs. Millis. She says they have a good choir there and even get invited to perform in other cities. We can't let such talent go to waste." Olivia listened to her grandmother and looked forward to starting school. She wanted to go on stage. She wanted to meet people who shared her hobbies. The future seemed bright and fabulous. And then the girl asked Mr. Shanks to teach her how to play the guitar. At first he refused. "It's too early for you. Your fingers are small, your hands are weak. You can't even hold this thing." But the neighbour was wrong. Olivia immediately managed to play the right chords from the first time. Molly and Kathy even clapped their hands with joy for their friend. "See, Grandpa, she can do it. Will you teach her?" "I will, of course," puzzled Mr. Shanks, scratched the back of his head. "Where else could I go now that you've convinced me?" The neighbour kept his promise and began teaching little Olivia chords and everything he knew on a daily basis. The young pupil made great progress, quickly grasping everything and even learning to pick up melodies. "I certainly do not know it," Mr. Shanks shared his observations with Sarah, "but she seems to have an exceptional ear. She should go to music school." "I wish," sighed the woman, "but we don't have one here. There's only a choir here, and going to the city every day is not feasible. At least they'll take her to the choir. Mrs. Millis promised, although Olivia is still young. Older kids sing there." Finally, the long-awaited first school day arrived. The girl was a little anxious, but overall filled with joyful excitement. Both Olivia and her grandmother had carefully prepared for this special day. The day before, they went to the city and spent a long time choosing the most beautiful things: shiny shoes, a smart white blouse, and a puffy dark skirt. In the morning, Olivia's grandmother braided her hair into tight braids, which were adorned with large white bows. Grandma handed her granddaughter a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Olivia still remembered the delightful fragrance they exuded. Passers-by smiled at the grandmother and the dressed-up granddaughter, congratulating them on the beginning of their school journey. They wished the girls only success. Olivia thanked the people, knowing that there would be a party in the evening. Her grandmother had already invited the neighbour kids to visit. Olivia was also eagerly awaiting the start of classes in chorus. She was so eager to sing on stage. Mrs. Millis assured her that she would really like the teacher, and indeed, Mr. Nelson highly appreciated the abilities of his new student. He didn't go easy on her, despite her young age. If Olivia missed a note or mixed up the words, he would mention it. But these were just minor details. The important thing was that Olivia felt at home in her element. Grandmother worried that the shy granddaughter would be nervous in front of an audience, but no, the little singer behaved on stage like a natural. First, Olivia sang as part of a group, and then she began performing solo. Mr. Nelson couldn't help but rejoice in his talented pupil. "Such a gift is rare," he told Olivia's grandmother during one of her visits. "A real uncut diamond. She should be in good hands. But what do we have? Just an ordinary little cultural centre." Meanwhile, Olivia didn't give up her guitar lessons either. It had become a daily necessity for her. As a student, she had long surpassed Mr. Shanks, but she still visited him every day. Firstly, he had a guitar, and secondly, the neighbour could always provide valuable and important advice about playing. And thirdly, none of Olivia's acquaintances knew as much about music as Mr. Shanks. He praised her, noticed subtle nuances, and genuinely admired the little neighbour's achievements. The neighbour replaced Olivia's grandfather, whom she had never known, and maybe even her father in certain moments. Time passed. Olivia grew up. She excelled in school, performed with the choir, and continued to play the guitar. Her father gave her an instrument of her own as a birthday gift, an idea suggested by her grandmother. Olivia had everything she needed for happiness: a caring grandmother nearby, understanding and kind neighbours, and loyal friends. She felt loved and at home in their small town, never considering moving to the city to live with her father. What would she do there? Grey concrete buildings instead of bright, colourful houses, crowds of people rushing by without even looking at each other, and her father, a familiar stranger. People around her often said that the city offered more opportunities, that girls would have a more interesting life there, but Olivia felt content and happy with her life. Her childhood was warm, sunny and cosy, until that fateful day in February when, for some reason, Mr. Shanks approached school to pick her up. Olivia had been going to school and returning home alone. Initially, her grandmother accompanied her, but since the second grade, Olivia had become quite independent in this regard. The road was not close, but in the company of her friends and neighbours, time passed quickly. The girls walked together, chatting about everything, laughing, discussing the details of the school day and making plans. And this seemed to be an ordinary day. During a literature lesson, there was a knock on the door, followed by a quiet conversation between the teacher and someone waiting outside. The teacher's worried eyes met Olivia's, and she said quietly, "Olivia, Mr. Shanks is here to pick you up." Olivia felt the gaze of everyone in the class fixed on her, an unusual occurrence. Seeing Mr. Shanks, Olivia immediately sensed that something terrible had happened. His faded look and grey complexion, along with his slightly trembling hands, gave it away. "Granny?" Olivia guessed immediately. An icy hand of anxiety squeezed her heart. At that moment she realised that her grandmother was her whole world. The elderly man nodded silently. "What happened to her?" She fell ill. They took her to the hospital. Only at home, Mr. Shanks said that Olivia's grandmother had gone forever. She suddenly felt sick and her heart seized. She sat down on a bench outside the house, intending to wait it out. However, a neighbour who came to borrow a couple of eggs discovered her and immediately called an ambulance. The doctors who arrived could only confirm her death. And so, Olivia was left all alone. Completely alone in the world. That night she was taken by Mrs. Millis. In the company of this kind-hearted woman and her grandchildren, Olivia's spirits lifted slightly, but she still felt as if she were in a state of disbelief. This couldn't be happening. How could her grandmother be gone? Her father was away on a voyage, and although he had been informed it would take time for him to return to the mainland, he didn't even make it in time for the funeral, which the neighbours had organised. During those dreadful days, Olivia didn't think much about her future. She cried a lot and often talked to the adults about her grandmother. Those who knew and loved her grandmother spoke kind words about her, which brought some solace to Olivia. And then her father finally arrived. He awkwardly hugged his daughter and uttered words that caused Olivia to recoil in pain once again. "Well, daughter, now we'll live together in the city." In the city? Why the city? Olivia didn't want to leave her hometown. Yes, her grandmother was gone forever, but here was her school, her friends, her neighbours, the choir, and Mr. Shanks, who always provided support and comfort. What awaited her in the city? A distant, unfamiliar father who knew nothing about his daughter. Yes, he was a stranger to Olivia. "I'm not going with you," Olivia said firmly, pulling away from her father. "I'm not going to the city." The man looked at his daughter, blinking confusedly. He didn't know what to say in response. The neighbours came to the rescue. With great care and gentleness, they conveyed to Olivia that there was no other option. They hugged the girl and expressed how much they would miss her. Tears welled up in their eyes, and they all gave Olivia their phone numbers and assured her that she could always call them. Olivia cried as well. It was difficult for her to say goodbye to her hometown, but the compassionate adults managed to convince her that it had to be done, that there was no other way. "You come to visit," Mr. Shanks said. "During the holidays, you, Molly and Kathy will live with me. It doesn't matter to me if there are 2 girls or 3. We'll all have more fun." Olivia knew that this invitation was genuine, not just a polite gesture, and this thought brought a little warmth and brightness to her heart. And so, Olivia went to the city. It wasn't the first time she found herself in her father's apartment. She and her grandmother had visited him before. Olivia even had her own room there, a bed, a spacious wardrobe and a desk, everything a child needed. However, she had never truly liked the place. She loved her bedroom at her grandmother's house much more. It was filled with cosy and cherished items, plush toys, interesting books and a colourful fish tank. But there was no other choice. She would have to settle into this new place. The first thing Olivia did was place the teddy bear that Mr. Shanks had given her the summer before, first grade, on her bed. It instantly made the room feel cosier. The toy reminded her of the happy and carefree times when her grandmother was by her side. Olivia's life was flipped completely upside down. She had to adapt to many new things: a new room, a new school, new faces, unfamiliar surroundings and different rules. She also had to adjust to her father, who was always lost in his own thoughts. Her father had to take on a new position that didn't involve months of sailings, so he could be with his daughter all the time. However, Jim was physically present but mentally preoccupied. Olivia noticed that her father missed the sea, his colleagues, friends and his old job, and he often complained to acquaintances about earning less money now. However, the man tried hard to be a good father. He always prepared breakfast for Olivia in the mornings and asked her about her day in the evenings. However, he only half-heartedly listened to her. Olivia could tell he wasn't interested in her thoughts about her teacher, or what her classmates said to her. Jim provided everything Olivia needed: clothes, food, school supplies and toys. He even enrolled her in a music school. "Didn't you used to play the guitar often in your granny's town? Why don't you play it anymore?" he asked. Olivia sighed. Since becoming a teenager, she hadn't felt in the mood to play anything. Her soul was overwhelmed and her thoughts were chaotic. She was so exhausted by the end of the day that she fell asleep immediately. Did she even have the energy to play the guitar? But her father's words reminded Olivia of her favourite instrument. She picked up the guitar, ran her fingers over the strings, and immediately felt a sense of relief, a warmth from the past. Why hadn't she realised before that music could soothe her so much? "Would you like to go to music school?" her father suggested. Olivia thought about it and agreed. From a young age, she had heard from others that she should attend music school. They believed that in their small town her talent couldn't fully develop without competent teachers from the city. Finally, there was an opportunity that everyone had been talking about. Just a couple of days after their conversation, the girls started attending a new school. It was a large, bright place, entirely different from their tiny cultural centre in town. The new teachers initially seemed strict and distant, which made Olivia a bit afraid. But once classes started, she realised she was accurately where she needed to be. There was so much new knowledge and so many nuances to learn. Olivia quickly absorbed musical literacy like a sponge and made great progress. The diligent and talented student soon earned praise from her teachers, which was very satisfying. Gradually, Olivia settled into the city and made new friends. They went to the movies, skating rink, pizzerias and entertainment centres. Sometimes they simply strolled in the park, and other times they gathered at someone's house. However, she couldn't form the same warmth and almost familial bonds she had with the kids in the town. Nevertheless, things were great. Her relationship with her father was polite but strained and awkward. He tried to be a parent, but it didn't come naturally to him. Olivia didn't feel even a fraction of the love and warmth her grandmother had given her, and it was very difficult. The girl felt emotionally frozen. It was good that she had music in her life. Olivia found solace by playing the guitar and immersing herself in the melodic sounds. She learned songs she liked or composed her own music. Through music, she expressed her emotions, longing for her grandmother and her former life, anxiety, and the desire to be closer to her father, who was now her only relative. Music provided relaxation, comfort, and a boost in her confidence. As time passed, the small family's life gradually improved. Jim was surprised to discover that his daughter was skilled in cooking. It was unexpected. Other children her age couldn't even hold a knife and were considered almost like babies. Olivia effortlessly handled all the kitchen tools and at a young age baked incredible pies and cooked flavourful soups. When the girl first made a delicious dinner, Jim was amazed. The aroma greeted him even before he entered the apartment, causing his mouth to water, but he couldn't believe that these enticing smells were coming from his own home. "Is this all you, or did someone come to visit us?" Jim marvelled as he entered the apartment. "It's me," Olivia smiled. She enjoyed seeing the amazement on her father's face. "My grandmother taught me." Indeed, her grandmother had taught her the art of cooking since she was a little girl. Olivia helped her grandmother knead dough and as she grew older, learned to handle a knife like an experienced cook. She even developed a genuine passion for cooking. It was almost like music, a true art. Now, Olivia often cooked for their small family and thoroughly enjoyed doing so. Gradually, the relationship between father and daughter improved. The adaptation process was not easy and took a long time. Both of them had to put in great effort, but in the end, Olivia achieved what she wanted: the warmth and care of her father. It didn't happen overnight or suddenly. Her father's heart slowly thawed. The icy barrier that held him back began to crack and crumble. One day, Jim found it interesting to have a conversation with his daughter. She had become mature and sensible. Now her father looked at her in an entirely different light. Olivia could feel the change and rejoiced in it. Her father no longer withdrew into himself when he came home from work, and he finally started sharing his future plans and work news with Olivia. Father and daughter went on several vacations, just as her grandmother had once asked. Jim showed Olivia the big cities of their country. These trips were truly wonderful. Olivia discovered that her father was a very intelligent and knowledgeable man. He had expertise in various fields such as architecture, history, archaeology, and culture, and he gladly shared this knowledge with his daughter. In the first summer, after Sarah's passing, Olivia and her father went to her town. Jim prepared the house for the long absence of its owners, closing the windows with shutters, wrapping the furniture in plastic, and getting rid of unnecessary items. During this time, Jim also discovered a real treasure: albums filled with pictures that his mother had carefully preserved. The albums contained the entire history of their family, from the ancestors of Olivia's grandparents to Olivia herself. The father took this archive back to their city apartment. The preparation of the house only took a couple of days. During this time, Olivia felt as she had really returned to the past, familiar places, smiling neighbours, and old friends who missed her dearly. When her father told her it was time to go back, Olivia even had tears in her eyes. "How can we leave? We haven't been here long enough." "Well, I have to go back to work, and I finished everything I needed to do. Why should we stay?" At that time, Jim didn't yet have much time to truly understand his own daughter. He couldn't comprehend her feelings. However, Mr. Shanks immediately understood everything. "Jim, let Olivia stay with me for at least a couple of weeks," the elderly man said. "My granddaughters have come to visit me. They've been friends since birth, the three of them. They miss each other. They will go for walks to the river and to the forest, to breathe fresh air. It's a blessing, isn't it? It's better for the girl to be here than in stuffy concrete boxes all day while you're at work." "I don't know." Jim stretched out uncertainly. "Mr. Shanks, you are almost nobody to her."
"What do you mean, nobody?"
Mr. Shanks was indignant.
"She's like a third granddaughter to me. I've been coddling her since her babyhood."
These words of the elderly neighbour echoed warmly in Olivia's heart. She looked pleadingly at her father. To spend at least a few weeks in her favourite town with the company of her best friends. It's happiness. When Jim agreed, Olivia jumped for joy, and Molly and Kathy jumped with her. It was a wonderful time. Everything as always. Games with friends till night, familiar places, neighbours who'd known Olivia from birth. Except Grandma wasn't around. Her house looked onto the road with its closed windows, and sadness occasionally clutched the girl's heart. And then the father came for his daughter, and everything ended. Olivia cried, leaving for the city. Friends and girlfriends hugged her. Mr. Shanks stroked the girl's head. "Well, dear, stop weeping and making dampness here. You're not going away forever. Here will be your autumn vacation. Your father will bring you here to rest. Just know that you are always welcome here." Olivia understood that Mr. Shanks said from the bottom of his heart. This consciousness of this simple truth became easier and warmer on her soul. But Olivia never came to this place for vacation. Soon after her departure, Mr. Shanks was hospitalised. A stroke. He made it out, but he could no longer live alone in his hometown. He was taken to his daughter, the mother of Molly and Kathy. The family lived in another city. So Olivia never again saw either her childhood girlfriends nor a kind neighbour. Anyway, the girl got used to the new reality. The relationship with her father became more cordial and warm. At least, next to Olivia, was always a native person, ready to support and listen. And the girl appreciated it. Soon the father started talking more and more often about the fact that he wanted to return to the sea. "You see, this is my element. The waves, the wind, the sea air and the expanse. Nothing for miles around. It's breathtaking. Olivia understood. She understood perfectly well what it was like when the heart starts to beat joyfully at the sight of favourite landscapes. And we don't have enough money, Jim lamented. Those who go on voyages are paid many times more, but here on the mainland the wages are quite different. Olivia didn't think they were in need. They had everything they needed, even more. They dressed beautifully, ate well, travelled. But her father still dreamed of more, and often recalled his former earnings. "Well, I'm an adult already," reasonably noted once Olivia. "I'm 13. I've been going to school myself for a long time. I have known how to cook since childhood. Why don't you come back? I see now you miss the sea. I can manage on my own." "Well, no. You're just a child. You can't be left alone for so long. What if something happens?" "Yes, what could happen?" sincerely perplexed the girl. She felt herself independent enough to live for a month or two alone. Yes, it would be boring without Daddy, of course, but she could manage. "By law, you cannot be left alone. You are only 13. The neighbours will find out. They'll call the guardianship office." "Yes, the neighbours here are strange. Not like in Granny's town," Olivia agreed. "And how will you feel about having a nanny?" "A nanny?" Olivia snorted. "What am I, some kind of baby?" "Well, if I go to the sea, I need someone to look after you. It won't be a babysitter for the little ones, but more like a housekeeper. Your au pair." "I don't need an au pair," muttered Olivia, but she already realised that her father would not leave her alone. It wasn't allowed. "All right, hire your housekeeper." The girl waved her hand finally. Jim, having made the decision to return to the sea, immediately perked up. Now he smiled and joked a lot. Jim looked like an absolutely happy man. Olivia rejoiced, looking at him, but also worried a little. What if she does not find common ground with this woman who should look after her and the house? What if it turns out to be some nasty woman? Meanwhile, the search for a housekeeper did not progress very well. Jim contacted many agencies and called the ads himself, but only came across babysitters for kids, and no one agreed to live with a teenager and look after the apartment. However, the man had not given up hope of finding such a person. "He who seeks will always find," he optimistically declared to his daughter after another failure. One day, he returned from a friend's birthday party, upbeat. It was late in the evening. Olivia was sitting over a difficult math homework assignment when the happy Jim came up to her and announced that that was it. The problem was settled. "What's settled?" The girl didn't understand. "I found a babysitter for you. Oh, sorry, I mean an au pair. It's such a deal, you can't even think of a better one." Olivia tensed a little. After all, it was her fate he was talking about. "Can you be more detailed?" asked the girl, and her father told his daughter the story of this fateful, as it would later turn out, meeting. Jim came to the birthday party of his buddy. They had graduated from college together and even worked on the same ship. Later, the paths of the old friends diverged, but they still had a warm, friendly relationship. Peter was celebrating his anniversary. On this occasion, he decided to have a big celebration in a restaurant. Among the guests were many people whom Jim had seen for the first time, including Felicity, an acquaintance of Peter's wife. The tall, slender woman looked beautiful, stylish, tastefully dressed, smiling and friendly. At some point, Felicity and Jim got to talking. Both of them had already had a few drinks and were relaxed. The evening passed into the phase of frank life stories. It turned out that Felicity had recently divorced her husband, or rather, according to the woman, her husband simply put her and her daughter on the street because of a stupid quarrel. "How could this man do this to his child?" outraged Jim. "I have a daughter myself, and I—" "Nancy is not his daughter," Felicity sighed. "This is my child from my first marriage. My husband, my ex-husband now, could never accept her. Probably because he never loved me, really." So Felicity found herself in a desperate situation. Money to rent a flat was catastrophically lacking. The woman could not find a good job, and she had no good education and no experience. Felicity devoted herself to her husband and daughter. She looked after the house, cooked delicious meals for her husband, organized the household, and he, a successful businessman, provided the family with money. Felicity felt delighted and protected, but without realizing it herself, she was in a very vulnerable position, as she was completely financially dependent on her husband. And now here I am, all alone, in such a plight, grasping for any part-time work to feed myself and Nancy. My parents are long gone. I have nowhere to go for help. My friend invited me to this party because she was sure that I needed to take my mind off everything a little, but I still think about my problems all the time. Yeah, and I used to think I was in a desperate situation, Jim said. It's much harder for you, of course. I hope everything works out for you in the end. I, for my part, will try to help you with work. We're looking for a secretary in the shipping industry. Oh, thank you. It is so kind. By the way, what happened to you? Felicity, ignoring the potential job offer, focused on the words, desperate situation. And Jim shared everything with this sensitive and beautiful woman. About the death of his beloved wife during childbirth, about his mother who raised his daughter until she was 10 years old, about the difficulties of becoming a single father, and of course, about his dream to return to the sea. I'm looking for someone like a nanny for my daughter, but no one agrees. People offer hourly babysitting services for babies, but no one wants to live with a teenager and take care of the house. Felicity's eyes lit up at this revelation from Jim. Jim, don't you realize that our meeting today is not an accident? The woman exclaimed. It's just some kind of miracle. Providence has brought us together. Much later, it would be discovered that it wasn't Providence that brought Jim and Felicity together. Peter's wife knew about the situation of her husband's friend and wanted to help him. The women purposefully arranged for Felicity and Jim to meet at the party. She thought it could be a wonderful solution for them. How old is your child? Felicity asked for clarification. 13. And my daughter Nancy is 15. I know how to raise teenage girls, how to connect with them. I enjoy communicating with them. We will definitely get along. Jim pondered for a moment. He had been hoping for a professional housekeeper from a specialized agency, but time was running out as he was soon leaving on a voyage and the problem remained unsolved. Your daughter is about to go through the teenage years. It's a very challenging period. I know Nancy and I have already gone through it. Children of that age require special supervision, otherwise trouble is not far behind. Felicity spoke convincingly and appeared quite confident. Jim hesitated. Indeed, this woman had a lot of experience dealing with children. She had a daughter, slightly older than Olivia. It could be interesting for the girls to be together. They would surely find common ground. Besides, Felicity was truly beautiful. Jim enjoyed her company. She was very pleasant. Finally, after thinking it over, he agreed. I think it's a great option. He smiled at Felicity, finding himself increasingly drawn to her. He saw her as a strong woman who had faced many hardships in life but had not been broken. She exuded kindness, pleasant, intelligent and sensitive. Yes, she was precisely the kind of person Jim would like to have beside Olivia. Soon Felicity and her daughter Nancy moved into Jim and Olivia's apartment. The man arranged for them to stay in the guest room, which had enough space. Both Felicity and Nancy immediately seemed like sweet and kind people to Olivia. Wow, you have such cool hair, Nancy exclaimed, barely seeing the girl. Can I try braiding it? Olivia shrugged her shoulders. Hairstyles had never really been her concern. She usually just put her hair in a neat ponytail for school. But Nancy created a stylish braided hairstyle that looked wonderful. Olivia admired her reflection in the mirror. You look beautiful, Nancy smiled. You do too, Olivia whispered, and it was the honest truth. Both Nancy and her mother were truly beautiful. Tall, slender, with big eyes, they always attracted attention, and men couldn't help but notice them. Both Nancy and Felicity knew how to accentuate their physical features favourably. They chose the right outfits, skillfully applied makeup, and created beautiful and very stylish hairstyles. At first, Olivia saw everything as magical. In her father's house, there was never any makeup or closets full of clothes. Olivia would watch mesmerised as Felicity applied makeup in front of the mirror. "Interesting, isn't it?" smiled Felicity, noticing the girl's gaze. "Come, sit next to me, and I'll show you how it's done." In just half an hour, Felicity transformed Olivia into an entirely different person. In the mirror, Olivia saw a beautiful girl with enchanting eyes, a gentle blush on her cheeks, and plump, doll-like lips. "You look gorgeous," marvelled Felicity. "You should always be like that." But Olivia wouldn't like always to be like that. Though it made her look beautiful, she didn't like the feeling of makeup on her face. Plus, it took a lot of time. Applying makeup and then washing it off could take an hour. Felicity and Nancy gave Olivia something she had been missing: a woman's attention. They went shopping together, chose outfits, gossiped, and discussed movies and celebrities. Now Nancy always braided Olivia's hair before school, creating wonderful and stylish hairstyles. Felicity and Nancy also helped Olivia with her wardrobe. "Your clothes are baggy and grey," Felicity complained, inspecting Olivia's closet. "I have to wear these to school," Olivia shrugged. She hadn't thought about this issue before. "Nonsense. You can always find something that fits the regulations and looks beautiful," exclaimed Felicity. "Nancy, let's go shopping. We need your advice. You have great taste." "Of course, I'm with you. I love shopping," replied Nancy. Felicity and Nancy picked out clothes for Olivia that made her look like a princess. Fitted lace blouses, slightly shorter skirts, and heeled shoes. "Well, this is different," rejoiced Felicity, admiring Olivia. "You have a wonderful figure. You're slender and long-legged. Why hide it under shapeless hoodies? You should be wearing something that flatters you." Olivia received more compliments at school than ever before. For the first time, she felt not just smart, but truly beautiful. And it was wonderful. Nancy became a real friend, almost like the sister Olivia had always dreamed of. Nancy shared stories about her relationships with boyfriends and girlfriends, which fascinated Olivia. Nancy turned out to be a wonderful storyteller, captivating Olivia with her smooth and measured speech. Olivia admired Nancy's life. "Are you two gossiping again?" Felicity peeked into Olivia's room. "Let's go and watch the movie. Pizza is here." Those were wonderful days. Olivia felt like she was part of an exquisite feminine world. Her father, Olivia adored him, but he couldn't provide her with the girlish companionship she needed. Olivia hadn't even realised it before. When Felicity discovered that Olivia was a good cook, she was delighted. "Wow," admired Felicity, seeing Olivia take a tray of pies out of the oven. "Did you make these yourself?" "Yes," answered Olivia proudly. "My grandmother taught me, and I've been able to do it for a long time." Olivia was tired of ordering food from restaurants, so she decided to treat Felicity and Nancy to homemade pastries. "It's divine," praised Nancy, taking a big bite of the pie. "I've never tasted anything like it. But it's not great for the figure, of course." "It's nice for your age," smiled Felicity. "Olivia, you surprised me. I still haven't learned to bake, and you're so young and already so good at it." Olivia blossomed from these compliments. To please Felicity and Nancy, she tried to cook something every day and did much better than Felicity. Felicity's soups were often too liquid and salty, and her casseroles constantly burned on top and didn't bake inside. That's why Felicity preferred ordering food at home. It was not difficult for Olivia to prepare dinner or lunch for them, and she did it with joy because Nancy and Felicity took care of her and taught her so much. However, when her father came back, Felicity and Nancy moved back into their rented apartment, which upset Olivia. She missed the heart-to-heart talks and trips to cafes and stores with them. Olivia missed Felicity and Nancy, who showed her a thoroughly different side of life that she had never even suspected. When her father asked her about her life in his absence, Olivia described Felicity and Nancy in vivid colours. "They are so cool, you can't imagine," she shared her impressions with her father. "It's so interesting with them, so good." Her father smiled, showing his satisfaction with her stories. A month later, Jim was sent on another voyage for an even longer period, and Felicity and her daughter came to look after Olivia again. Time flew by unnoticed, and when the father returned, Felicity and Nancy stayed in the apartment, which made Olivia incredibly happy. Olivia noticed that her father looked at Felicity in a special way, and although Felicity tried to hide it, it was clear that she sympathised with her employer. Olivia thought it might be wishful thinking, but soon she realised it was not. "Everything had been coming up to this for a long time," Nancy said, looking at Olivia as if she were a little child. "I didn't doubt that it would be like this, but I was a little wrong about the timing." Then Jim left for another voyage, and when he returned, he and Felicity were married. They had a cosy wedding with just the four of them in a restaurant. Olivia was over the moon at the time, as this beautiful and kind woman had entered their family. She would now live with them and provide Olivia with the necessary female attention that she craved. It was great. Olivia had long dreamed of something like this, but everything turned out much better than she could have imagined. Because now she also had Nancy, practically an older sister and a friend who knew so many interesting things. Unfortunately, everything changed as soon as her father went on a voyage. The status of wife drastically transformed Felicity's attitude towards her stepdaughter. Olivia had expected her stepmother and half-sister to treat her with care, have heart-to-heart talks and go on walks together. But all of that abruptly stopped. Felicity started spending time with friends and going to beauty salons. Nancy also lived her own life with friends, admirers, and nights out at clubs. And Olivia was left all alone and felt completely disregarded. The only thing Olivia was praised for was her cooking and cleaning. She single-handedly cleaned the entire apartment and cooked elaborate meals just to earn Felicity's approval. But her stepmother would discreetly praise her and then order her to do more chores the next day. Sometimes Felicity would ask Olivia to mop the floors. That was the extent of their communication. Olivia felt confused and deceived. "Hey, Nancy, tell me, how was it hanging out at the club?" Olivia once asked Nancy. Nancy absent-mindedly looked at Olivia and said nothing. When the girl repeated her question, Nancy sighed heavily and muttered, "You're such a clingy girl, always sticking around. It's impossible to be around you." It was a blow to Olivia. She had thought that she and Nancy were friends. The girl used to willingly share details of her life with Olivia. They used to talk a lot and go on walks together, and now everything had changed. But there was more to come. Felicity had gotten used to that Olivia did many chores, and soon Olivia was responsible for all the household chores. In the absence of her husband, Felicity hardly cooked anymore. It became the duty of her stepdaughter. The same went for cleaning. If before the girl would at least receive praise for helping at home, she now only received remarks and reproaches if she couldn't keep up with everything, and it was overwhelming. Olivia was still studying and attending music school. Naturally, her grades suffered. It was impossible to manage everything at home and excel in her studies. Olivia tried to explain to Felicity that she couldn't handle it all. "Felicity, I'm tired. I don't have time to do my homework. I've already missed music school too many times. Let Nancy cook and clean once in a while." "That, my dear, is called laziness." Felicity looked at her stepdaughter with an indifferent gaze. "Nothing supernatural is required of you. Didn't you know that people who live together share household chores equally?" Olivia was shocked. Equal? That was too far-fetched to be true. Nancy did nothing, absolutely nothing at home. Even her bed had to be made by Olivia. She lived as she pleased, meeting friends, going on dates, shopping. Sometimes she would even come home at night. Felicity called her from time to time. She even went somewhere at night to take her daughter. Only Olivia's father, he knew nothing about this side of Nancy's life. In his presence, the girl behaved impeccably. "Nancy is preparing for her final exams," Felicity declared in response to all Olivia's fair remarks about Nancy. However, Olivia had never seen Nancy with a textbook in her hands. The girl attended school reluctantly and had big problems with her studies. The young lady's mind was only occupied with dating and partying, and she only cared about her appearance. Most of the money Jim left for the household, Felicity spent on herself and her daughter. The woman was only busy in the kitchen and the house when Olivia was at home, creating the image of an ideal housewife. She didn't work. She explained to her husband that the girls needed special supervision during this difficult age. "I should keep an eye for our teenagers in this period." Jim agreed with Felicity's arguments. She knew how to convince others that her decisions were reasonable and beneficial to everyone. It was her talent. And Jim sincerely believed that he himself had offered his wife to take care of the house and girls, and he appreciated what he thought was Felicity's sacrifice, putting her career on the back burner for the happiness and well-being of the family. Felicity had a great influence on Jim. He looked at her with adoring eyes, believed every word she said, and considered her perfect and infallible. Olivia used to like it. She was happy for her father. After so many years alone, he had finally found love. But now the girl felt hurt and scared. Felicity gradually transformed from a kind and sensitive woman into a monster. The stepmother made higher and higher demands on Olivia. "What are you strumming on that bandura?" Felicity scornfully pointed her impeccably manicured finger at the guitar. "I already have a headache from your tedious songs." Olivia remained silent. She knew that if she opened her mouth and tried to defend herself, she would receive a torrent of insults. It was better to stay quiet. So the stepmother would calm down faster. Yes, Felicity didn't like Olivia's passion for music. She repeatedly called the girl talentless and constantly asked her to play quietly, as if it were possible. She even forced her stepdaughter to skip lessons at the music school. Only music? It was a real salvation for the girl. Playing it soothed her, relaxed her, and brought her joy, as there was very little joy in Olivia's life. With her father, Felicity behaved very differently, of course. Olivia couldn't get used to this transformation. Felicity was a sensitive and caring parent, a wonderful homemaker, and a loving wife. Father often repeated how lucky he was to have met such a woman. And of course, Felicity slowly turned the man against his daughter. She weaved her web of lies, carefully, delicately, masterfully. Olivia is going through puberty. She has become so snappy with me, lazy, and hates everyone around her. She has lost interest in her studies. It doesn't matter to her. She only thinks about going out, just to get out of the house. Felicity told Jim, not particularly caring if Olivia overheard their conversation. Jim refused to believe his daughter's words, even if she tried to justify herself. Felicity's influence was too strong, skillfully manipulating those around her. What should we do? Jim looked at his spouse with confusion, seeking advice, help and support. Of course, he loved his daughter and didn't want her to spiral into darkness. "I think she should leave the music school," the stepmother once suggested. "Olivia spends too much time on nonsense, and her studies are suffering. I have a feeling that she is hanging out with the wrong people under the guise of the music school. I spoke to her music teacher, and there have been many absences." As usual, Jim agreed with Felicity. Her words always held sway. When he informed his daughter that she would no longer be involved in music, Olivia immediately recognised whose decision it was. For the first time, the girl openly objected, defending her passion and becoming unexpectedly bold and decisive. "No, I don't want to leave the music school. Felicity, she just wants me to spend more time at home, doing all the household chores. I cook, I clean, I do the laundry. It feels like I'm a servant here while you're away." "You see now?" Felicity looked at her spouse, appearing both frustrated and concerned. "You see how she reacts? All I'm doing is teaching our child the importance of work. It's not a big deal. In normal families, children have some small responsibilities. But Olivia just wants to party and be free. It's dangerous at her age." "Look at your daughter!" Olivia couldn't handle it and snapped. This played right into Felicity's hands. She portrayed herself as an understanding woman who didn't take offence at the irritable teenager, but only worried about her and wished her well. Olivia had tried to complain about Felicity to her father before, but he never took her words seriously. After all, his new wife was so perfect. "You're just jealous." Jim stroked his daughter's head. "I'll try to pay more attention to you." No matter what Olivia said, it sounded unconvincing because her father was constantly under Felicity's influence, an experienced manipulator. After this open quarrel, Olivia felt that her words no longer held any meaning for Jim. Finally, Olivia had to leave the music school. Her father insisted, depriving her of her only outlet. Occasionally, she still played for herself, which provided some relief from the constant stress she was experiencing. To further reinforce her control, Felicity would push father and daughter forehead to forehead. She played people like pawns on a chessboard. The father was completely under the spell of his charming wife. He firmly believed that puberty had turned his beloved daughter into a monster, and he thanked his lucky stars that an experienced and attentive woman was by the girl's side during this difficult time. Once, Nancy took money from the family stash. Olivia knew about it. She overheard Nancy asking her mother for money for a trip with friends. Felicity refused her daughter, explaining that she didn't like her friends. However, Nancy was not one to abide by restrictions. She went to the trip anyway, which infuriated Felicity. She scolded her daughter over the phone, made threats, and ordered her to return immediately. Of course, Nancy had no intention of obeying. She was not that kind of person. Both Felicity and Olivia knew where Nancy got the money from, Jim's stash. But when the father returned, the stepmother blamed everything on Olivia. Nancy was already home by that time, pretending to be a model high school student. With her acting skills, she even surpassed her mother. The father didn't scold his daughter then. No, he talked to her at length, trying to find out why she needed such a large sum. "Are you in trouble? Do you need help?" Olivia tried to explain the truth to her father, but he recoiled as if in severe pain, begging her not to deceive him. "Tell me the truth," pleaded the father, taking his daughter's hands. "What's happening to you?" Olivia remained silent. It was useless. Her father viewed her as a troubled teenager capable of stealing. Felicity's words proved to be a powerful weapon. Her father didn't trust his own daughter, yet he unquestioningly believed every word from his wife. Time was passing, and Nancy's enrollment in college was approaching. Olivia realized that her image of a diligent student would fail. How would the stepmother explain it to her father? She had spent years crafting the image of her daughter. In her stories, Nancy was portrayed as a smart, diligent and gifted girl. As for Olivia, she had somehow grown accustomed to this life. Reprimands, ridicule, indifference, household chores, restriction in everything. Olivia sometimes felt like Cinderella. Felicity was the textbook stepmother. It's true what they say, a fairy tale is a lie, but there's a hint of truth in it. And then, in her father's absence, Alan started visiting Felicity, a young man well-dressed, always smiling and polite. The woman explained to the girls that he was a distant relative, but the way Alan looked at Felicity made Olivia realise that the stepmother was lying. Nancy didn't believe her mother either. She smiled sarcastically every time this guest appeared in the house. Now, Felicity could afford not to come home at night, and Olivia understood perfectly well what was going on. She was no longer a little girl. The stepmother had a lover, young, handsome, charming, head over heels in love. The girl felt sorry for her father, who trusted his wife so much. She tried to understand why Felicity needed this man. After all, she didn't do anything without a reason. If she had brought a man closer to her, it was only to gain something from him, although perhaps it was a matter of feelings. He was a handsome man, resembling the guys in magazines. Even Nancy looked at him in a special way. Olivia told her father about the man who sometimes came to their house and about Felicity's frequent absences. Her father frowned. "Are you telling the truth, or are you trying to smear Felicity again? You're always fighting." "Dad, it's true," the girl almost shouted. She felt that her father didn't fully believe her, but she managed to plant a seed of doubt in his mind. Of course, Jim talked to his wife. She told him something about a relative who had come from another town for a short time and then complained again about Olivia, accusing her of lying and arguing with everyone out of a desire to protest. Olivia heard every word from her stepmother. The girl clenched her fists in impotent anger. Felicity looked and sounded as convincing as always. Jim didn't know what to do. He couldn't simply quit his dream job again and return to the mainland. However, now it would be even harder to do so. After all, he was not only supporting himself and his daughter, but also 2 other people. He had taken on the responsibility, so he had to provide adequately for the family. Olivia is completely out of control. Perhaps she needs her father around, but how can I leave the ship? Earning a few pennies is no longer an option for me. Felicity, charming, delightful, intelligent and delicate. Jim fell head over heels for this woman at first sight. They met at a mutual friend's anniversary and soon realised they could help each other. It was like a puzzle coming together. He felt at ease, knowing his daughter was in safe hands while he was away on a voyage. Coming home became much more enjoyable, knowing his beautiful and beloved woman awaited him eagerly. Jim had forgotten how wonderful it could be. He even envied himself. But then came Olivia's notorious transition into adolescence. The girl became lazy, argumentative, lied, skipped classes, and tried to provoke conflicts with his stepmother and father. She even took a significant amount of money from the family savings. Jim didn't know how to navigate his daughter through this challenging phase with minimal damage. But now, Olivia had crossed all the boundaries of what was permissible. She hinted that Felicity had a lover named Alan. Felicity did not deny that indeed her relative, who recently moved to their city, had visited them. He was a busy young man who never found time to get acquainted with Jim, as he worked hard to make his way in life. But Olivia, she insisted that Felicity was a deceitful monster and that Alan was her lover. Jim looked into his daughter's honest eyes and was horrified. Had Olivia become a slanderer and a liar? It was so unlike her. That's when Jim decided to install a hidden surveillance camera which could record the footage and send it to him. When he returned, he would provide Olivia with proof. She would see the recordings and realise how baseless and ugly her attempts to smear Felicity were. Perhaps something would click in her mind and she would come to her senses. There's nothing more sobering than seeing oneself from an outside perspective. But Jim did not expect what he would witness. At first, he felt a sense of guilt for invading his family's privacy, as if he didn't trust them. But the footage that camera captured turned his entire perception upside down. Felicity truly treated Olivia like a servant. She looked at her with contempt, forcing the girl to work for the entire family. Olivia not only cleaned up after herself and performed simple chores, but also took care of the entire house, cleaning, cooking meals. And all she received in return were reproaches and insults. No, Felicity didn't behave like that when Jim was at home. Jim couldn't believe his eyes. His heart ached as he saw Olivia as a helpless Cinderella. So, Felicity really had been lying all this time, with such honest, devoted eyes. And Olivia, how many times had she tried to communicate with him, and he was too fool to believe a word she said. How terrible! Poor girl! If he could, the man would have travelled hundreds of kilometres to protect his daughter. With his own hands, he made his own child's life a nightmare. Olivia's stories about Alan were also confirmed. Indeed, a young man would sometimes come to their house, and he would not hug Felicity in an innocent manner. There was a genuine affair between Felicity and Alan. The camera turned out to be of high quality. Jim heard every word spoken by them. Alan turned out to be an experienced and very affordable lawyer. Felicity definitely wouldn't have enough money to pay for his services. That's why she took the usual route, using her female charms. Yes, Felicity and Alan were lovers. The young lawyer was probably under the influence of Felicity's natural magnetism, and she, of course, pursued her goal. Soon enough, Jim realised what was happening. All this was about Sarah's house, which she left as an inheritance for her granddaughter. Felicity knew about it and was looking for a way to sell the property. She needed the money. Nancy, the woman's own daughter, wouldn't be able to attend college on a scholarship. The girl never bothered to study, and as we know, miracles don't happen. Therefore, Felicity needed a substantial amount of money to cover Nancy's tuition. The woman knew very well that Jim, no matter how much he loved her, would never agree to such a thing. That's why she needed Alan. As Olivia's guardian, Felicity had the right to manage Sarah's house and use the proceeds to pay for Nancy's education, and Alan, being an experienced lawyer, helped his mistress in this case. Realising what was happening, Jim clenched his fists in impotent anger. Olivia couldn't be left alone with these terrible people. There was still plenty of time until the end of the trip. It would be difficult to cut short the business trip, but Jim would do it. Olivia was in danger. Olivia struggled to hold back her tears. She didn't want Nancy to see how hard it was for her. She and her mother deliberately bring her to breakdowns. The girl more than once made ugly scenes in front of her father because she could not continue to hold everything in herself. This played into her stepmother's hands. Now, Felicity accused Olivia of promiscuity. The stepmother was diligently creating the image of a negligent, rude and lazy daughter in her father's eyes, and now a promiscuous girl as well. Olivia simply spent the night at her friend's house and had informed Felicity about it on the phone. "Yes, what do you want?" the stepmother indifferently replied. "I don't care." Of course, she didn't care. The day before, Olivia had cleaned the entire apartment and cooked for a couple of days. Otherwise, the stepmother would not have allowed her to leave the house. Upon returning home in the morning, Olivia found police officers in the apartment. At first, the girl thought it was Nancy. She often disappeared at night, and Felicity would occasionally go to get her daughter out of trouble. "I see we've found the missing person, right?" the policeman asked, crying Felicity, and she nodded her head. And then the girl realised what was going on. The stepmother had reported to the police that her stepdaughter, who was not yet an adult, had not returned home for the night, even though she knew perfectly well where she was. "I warned you that I would stay at my friend's house," Olivia said, staring at her stepmother in amazement. The girl had already suspected that the woman had come up with a new way to portray her stepdaughter as a troubled teenager, this time by involving the police. "You're lying again," sobbed the woman. "What am I going to do with you?" "One more trick like that and we'll put her on the register," warned the official as he left the apartment. To be put on the register. Perhaps that was precisely what the stepmother wanted. And now Olivia tried not to cry as she curled up on her bed. She hugged the bear, which had been given to her by Mr. Shanks, and realised that she would once again be portrayed as a lost girl in front of her father. And he, as always, would unquestionably believe his wife and look at his daughter with sad, anxious eyes. It was so difficult to bear. Suddenly, there was the sound of the front door opening. Olivia became alarmed. Who could it be? Nancy and Felicity were at home. Father would be at sea for another 3 weeks. Had Felicity really given the key to that Alan of hers? This was the last thing they needed. But it was Jim's voice that came from the hallway. "I'm home." "You're back so soon?" Felicity's voice sounded confused and at the same time overly happy. "What a joy!" "I know everything." The man obviously did not share his wife's delight. "I have seen and heard everything. Pack your things. You have until tonight. You will not do anything more to my daughter. Nothing." Olivia's heart pounded like a caged bird. She rushed into the hallway and clung to her father's neck. How did he know about everything? Olivia would find out later, but for now it didn't even matter. Jim held his daughter in a strong embrace. He smelled of the sea. "Everything will be all right now," the man murmured. "Forgive me for not believing you. I won't let anyone hurt you again."